Arabia, a vast desert graced with lush oases. This happy Arabia, as the ancient Romans called it, was inhabited by a few Bedouin tribes who lived from their herds and caravan trade. Situated at the crossroads of the trade routes from India to Africa and the West, the Arabian Peninsula was also a land of seafarers. Silk from India, pepper from the Malabar coast, nutmeg from the Molucca Islands. Most of the treasures that transited through the peninsula came from far-off countries, with one exception, frankincense. It came from the southern part of Arabia, and ever since the early dynasties of ancient Egypt, was a precious commodity for sacred rituals. The discovery and subsequent exploitation of oil in the 1950s totally upset the economic equilibrium that had existed since the dawn of time. In just a few years, sprawling, extravagant cities sprang up from the desert sands. The Bedouins abandoned their tents and their nomadic way of life. Now they use only air-conditioned vehicles to get around. Today, tourists come from all over the world to admire the extravagant architecture of Bahrain and the Arab Emirates of Abu Dhabi and Dubai. Flush with oil revenue, the Sultanate of Oman, which occupies the traditional frankincense-producing lands, is now firmly committed to progress, without, however, abandoning the age-old traditions that forged its history.
Oman trade has always been very much to do with the sea. If you are in Oman, you have seen we have 1,700 kilometers of a coastline that stretches from Musandam right in the north all the way to the south in the far. And the sea has dominated our lives, and we have always been sea traders. And then we have the Hajar Mountains that cut off Oman almost from our neighbors in the peninsula. So sea has played quite an important role, much more than the caravan route.
According to the legend, Oman, the only country on the Arabian Peninsula giving onto both the Persian Gulf and the Indian Ocean, was the birthplace of the intrepid mariner Sinbad the Sailor. This mythical character of the tales of 1001 Nights was surely inspired by the Omani seafaring traders who were masters of the Indian Ocean for centuries. What better proof than the fact that it was an Omani, Ahmad bin Majid, who guided Vasco da Gama from Africa to India on his historical voyage in 1497. Out of respect for tradition, we arrive in the port of Muscat by sea. From the capital of the Sultanate, we will travel the country from north to south to discover the country's dual history, the saga of the mariners and traders, and the story of the frankincense route that started in the ports of Dhofar and from there spread throughout the world. We begin our journey on the centuries-old route from Muscat to Nizwa, the former capital of the Sultanate. The country, once a British colony, has always been composed of two parts. Right up until 1970, the eve of independence, Muscat and Oman were still referred to as two separate entities. Muscat represented the outer country, the land of sailors, the capital of an empire that stretched all the way to East Africa. Oman was the inner country, the land of the Bedouins and Imams, who were continually in conflict with the Sultanate of Muscat for the control of the country. Following a dry riverbed, the Sumail Wadi, through the Hajar Mountains, we make our way to Nizwa. Tomorrow is the big market day. Like every week, the central plaza of Nizwa will turn into a huge livestock market. Cattle raisers come from all over to auction off their goats and sheep. Nizwa occupies a strategic position and has always controlled the major trade routes crisscrossing the country. They say that Marco Polo stopped here. Ibn Battuta, the great Moroccan traveler and geographer, who sojourned here in 1350, gave this description of the city.
This town is at the foot of a mountain and is surrounded by gardens and rivers. It possesses a very lovely and well-kept souk. The mosques are spacious and very clean, and the tribes are forever warring with each other.
The description is still rather accurate. Only the fort, the pride and joy of Nizwa, is missing, for it wasn't constructed until the late 17th century to celebrate the departure of the Portuguese from Muscat.
Nizwa was at one time the capital of the country. That's why it's an important city. It was chosen as capital because of its strategic position. Nizwa, in the center of the country, is the link between the eastern and western regions. The surrounding mountains form a sort of natural barrier. Lastly, it was chosen as capital because it has abundant sources of water. The Sultanate of Oman has many citadels and fortified dwellings and more than 500 forts. Many of them have a historical importance, and some, like Nizwa, are famous. There are also the towers. They were built on mountaintops, and you can find them from Muscat all the way into the interior of the country. These towers were used to communicate between the regions, using rifle shots. According to the message, a different number of shots would be fired.
Nizwa's souk is one of the oldest in Oman. At one point, the stone archways and the beams over the aisles were on the brink of collapsing, so the entire souk was redone in 1944. Just one small corner remained in the original state. A few dozen meters long, but an enormous jump back in time. There are no more arms makers, or jewelers, or saddle makers. There are only some small shops displaying a confusion of spices, incense, sweets, and all sorts of utensils. Observing the faces of the vendors, we can't help but thinking that the souk Ibn Battuta visited almost 700 years ago couldn't have been very different. We leave the lush palm grove of Nizwa and strike out on the route heading southeast in the direction of the Wahiba Desert. As the kilometers slip by, we leave the mountains and palm groves of Nizwa behind and enter into a vast desert plain. The only vegetation here is some scrawny brush growing here and there. Musalam, our guide, is from Muscate. It was his idea to take us out into the Wahiba desert to enjoy the sunset. He loves sharing with others the many different landscapes and light that his country has to offer. We soon leave the straight asphalt road for the sand and a trail that will take us into the heart of the Wahiba desert.
What are you doing?
We have to let some air out to soften the tires. They'll grip better, especially in the sand. It's no good with hard tires.
How is it possible? 5 minutes ago we were in the mountains. Now we are in the desert?
Well, we've changed regions. We've left the mountainous region and we're near the sea. And if you cross the desert, a good 60 kilometers in that direction, you'll come to the Indian Ocean. That's one of Oman's mysteries. The variety between mountain, desert, and sea. You can see all three of them in the same day.
We spent the night in a little village of tents for travelers crossing the desert. We're up and ready to get on the road very early in order to avoid the scorching heat.
Good morning, Musalam. You're preparing today's itinerary?
Yes, we have to plan things out in the morning before taking off for the day's tour. Right now, we're in the Wahiba desert. We're going to head out of the Wahiba desert. We're almost 40 kilometers from the national highway, and from there, we'll go straight on to the Wadi Bani Khalid.
What's a wadi?
The Wadi Bani Khalid is a sort of huge pool, like a natural swimming pool surrounded by a palm grove with date palms.
There are corridors about 1 kilometer wide separating the series of dunes. If you don't stray off them, they can take you straight across the Wahiba desert, which measures 200 kilometers from north to south and 80 kilometers from east to west. A unique desert, composed in part of sand brought by the winds all the way from the seacoast of the Indian Ocean. The Wahiba Desert gets its name from a Bedouin tribe that settled in the region. There are still 2,000 to 3,000 of them living in this desert. The Bedouins are semi-nomadic and migrate according to the season and their livestock's needs in water and food. They live in makeshift shelters made from acacia branches, corrugated iron, and other salvaged material.
What time of year do you come here?
We all come here in the winter.
You all come?
Yes, the whole family.
What are your activities here?
Well, there aren't really any activities here, apart from taking care of the livestock.
Could you imagine eventually living in just one spot and not traveling?
I don't understand what you mean.
In just one house?
Oh no, out of the question. We live part of the time in a stone house and part of the time here. We could never live in just one spot.
We once again pick up the trail crossing the Wahiba desert and head for the Wadi Bani Khalid. Musalem hasn't stopped telling us about how beautiful it is. After driving a few hours through rock-strewn desert, we come into a valley surrounded by arid mountains. Then all of a sudden, rounding a bend, we come upon the Wadi Bani Khalid, a Garden of Eden that appeared out of thin air. The water flowing down into the wadi is collected at the foot of the mountains and stored in large natural pools. This system of irrigation, made up of falages, man-made channels, is 2,500 years old and was introduced to Arabia by the Persians. The use of this water, the source of life, is regulated by ancestral laws that all the farmers of the Wadi Bani Khalid respect.
On Mondays, the water is open from 3 a.m. to 6 p.m. On Tuesdays, it's 3 a.m. to 8 a.m. On Thursdays, 2 to 5 a.m. The water belongs to everyone, but we regroup to use it. Each family has their water rights, but they have to exercise it in groups made up of 4 to 5 families. The water can't go to an individual, it has to be shared with a group.
And when the father dies?
When the father dies, his children inherit the water rights, and if they die, it's the grandchildren who inherit.
From Nizwa and the Hajar Mountains to the Wahiba Desert, we've traveled the inner country, the Bedouin country of Oman. Now that we're back in Muscat, we're going to take a look at the outer country, the land of sailors and seafaring traders.
Oman has always been a sailing nation, but you can divide it in two parts, I think. The medieval trades, which was much more along the Indian subcontinent to China. And there was an Irish researcher who wrote a book, I'm quite sure you came across, called The Simbel Voyage, which explained the trade routes to China. And then the second phase is much more recent. By recent, I mean 400 or 500 years, when the Portuguese came to Oman and colonized some part of the coastal strip of Oman to control their trade routes to India. From this presence of the Portuguese came the Al Said dynasty, which rules Oman now for almost 250 years, because the founder of this dynasty came to defeat the Portuguese here and started the sailing empire, if you like.
Starting in 1652, the Omanis began taking back the major part of the Portuguese possessions in Africa, Mogadishu, Mombasa, and Zanzibar. In so doing, they were merely re-establishing their influence that had already existed in the region as far back as the 7th or 8th century. For that was when the Omani navigators started making regular calls in all the ports along the East African coast. This time around, the Omanis would stay in the region for several centuries. Zanzibar, wrested from the Portuguese in 1652, even became the capital of the Sultanate of Zanzibar, Muscat, and Oman in the middle of the 19th century. Upon the death of the Sultan Said in 1856, the empire was split up. One of the Sultan's sons inherited Zanzibar, and his descendants remained in power there right up until 1964. One can see the blend of Africa and Arabia in the faces of Zanzibar's inhabitants. And the dhows that continue to ply the coast down to Mombasa and Dar es Salaam are the same as the Omanis used in the Persian and Arabian Gulfs right up until a few decades ago. So for 2 centuries, Omani navigators played an important role in the trade relations between Africa and Arabia. The only blot on the picture was the shameful slave trade, and the island of Zanzibar was its main hub. We leave Muscat and follow the coast south towards Sur. This little port, dozing on its lagoon, once played a major role in the relations between Oman, East Africa, and India. Ahmad bin Majid, the great navigator who in fact guided Vasco da Gama to the threshold of India, was from Sur. The rhythm of the monsoon winds in the Indian Ocean baffled the Portuguese at the time, but held no secrets for the Omani navigators. And the term monsoon comes from the Arabic mausin, meaning season. Salt, wood, fruit, dried fish, all these goods, as well as arms and slaves, were transported by dhows built in Sur's shipyards. With their broad beam, shallow draft, and large lateen sails, dhows, also called bagalas or ganjas, according to their size, were masters of the Indian Ocean until the advent of the English steamers at the beginning of the 20th century. Rashid, now 80 years old, started out as a simple sailor. He then began to outfit his own boats and eventually became rich. His entire life has been spent on the sea, sailing from Oman to India and Africa.
Back when I was sailing, we would carry dates. We would ship them to India or to Aden or Yemen. We would call in on both the trip out and the trip back. On other trips, we'd go to Karachi and Bombay and even Calicut. We'd travel for 6 months of the year. As we're using sailboats, the length of the voyage would depend on the wind. We never knew how long we were going to be at sea. A trip to Aden, which is not too far, could take 10 to 15 days. Sometimes we'd take on salt in Aden and then take it to Mombasa or Zanzibar.
The age of the sumbuks, the long-haul dhows that Rashid used to sail, is now long gone. The carpenters in the Sur shipyards, who were once renowned for their sculpting talents, have now been replaced by Indian immigrant workers. In India, they've preserved the traditional skills needed for building dhows. In the village of Alayal, where Rashid lives, most of the old dwellings belong to former seafaring traders. They are a testament to a golden age when hundreds of dhows came in and out of the port every day. The boats moored in the port now may still look like their predecessors, but they're motorized and used mainly for fishing along the coast. Some of these dhows belong to Rashid's grandson, Ahmed. In a way, he's the heir of the family tradition. Every chance he gets, the old captain comes down to the dock to bless his grandson before he heads out and enjoy, yet more one time, the feel of the ocean wind on his face.
My grandfather taught me patience, perseverance, resistance, endurance, and above all, that you have to earn your living and you have to fight for it. For example, when you find yourself facing a difficult situation, a storm, or other dangers, my dream was to become captain and do like the others, follow the same path as them, commanding boats that sailed to Africa, the Gulf, Yemen, and Somalia. I would have loved to travel to all those places where they put in to see how the old-time sailors lived and worked.
The day is drawing to a close. The light from the setting sun bathes the facades of the old mariners' houses. The tide has gone out, leaving the boats high and dry on the sand like so many wounded birds. For Rashid, it's a moment of nostalgia and of regrets.
I would have liked my children to follow in my footsteps, to live with the sea. But nowadays, young people study, go to school, and then they're free to choose other paths. Things aren't like what they used to be when you had to go to sea. I made my first voyage when I was 10, and we were out 6-7 months before we got back. If my grandchildren could live like I lived, God willing, That would be wonderful.
We're headed south to the province of Dhofar that stretches from the Sea of Oman to Rub al-Khali, the desert of deserts. It's the ancient kingdom of Hadramaut, the mythic land of frankincense. Salalah, the capital of Dhofar, is a rather nondescript city, a modern city with avenues that are too wide, disappearing into the rocky plain past the edge of the town. Dhofar is the only region of the Gulf that benefits from the monsoons. During the summer, torrents of rain beat down on the mountain, and the vast arid plain around Salalah blooms into a rich prairie. Between June and September, thousands of Emiratis flock to Salalah to get relief from the sweltering heat of Dubai and Abu Dhabi and enjoy the cool weather of Dhofar. Salalah has its back to the desert and faces the Sea of Oman. Its vast sand beach, with its coconut trees and gatherings of fishermen, give it a tropical look. Fishing, along with agriculture, remain the mainstays of the local economy. Thanks to the monsoon, the stocks of water are abundant and allow them to grow not only coconuts, but also other tropical fruit like papayas and bananas. This abundance is a blessing of the climate. But one mustn't forget that for thousands of years, it was frankincense that made Dhofar one of the richest regions of happy Arabia. Discovered in 1952, the archaeological site of Sumhuram, about 50 kilometers from Salalah, gives us a good idea of just how important frankincense was in the ancient world. During the excavation, they unearthed a temple dedicated to Sin, god of the moon, and one of the major divinities of Hadramaut. But most of the buildings were warehouses for storing frankincense from the far-off valleys of Dhofar and the merchandise that was imported in exchange for it. Shards of Roman pottery, Indian statues, the objects discovered in Sumhuram prove that there was indeed trade between the southern coast of Arabia and the Roman world, the Red Sea, East Africa, and India. The boats imported cloth, wheat, and sesame oil in exchange for frankincense. Greece and Rome brought large quantities of frankincense for their religious ceremonies. It's said that Nero burned more frankincense at his wife Poppaea's funeral than all of Arabia produced in 1 year. There are, in fact, not just one, but many frankincense routes. One of the oldest was a caravan route that crossed the desert to Mesopotamia. Others went from Sumhuram through Cana, and then went to Alexandria either by striking out across the Arabian desert or by sailing up the Red Sea. The last known routes were from the ports of Dhofar by sea in the direction of the Persian Gulf, India, and China. For centuries, the Egyptians and the Assyrians fought for control of the frankincense trade. The Emperor Augustus even sent out an army in 24 BC to take control, but in vain. And then the frankincense trade slowly declined, merging with the course of history and the demands of the modern world. The frankincense routes faded into the desert sands, faded from the memory of the seafarers and caravan drivers. For the inhabitants of Dhofar, frankincense is still very much a part of their lives. Even if the market vendors have their eye out for tourists, the bulk of their clientele is local. In Salalah, burning incense still means a special occasion, festive and friendly.
العود العادي بعطيك العود العادي، هاي الانواع خاصه اللي برويك اياها هنا. إذا كم بغيت وحدة أنت؟
فين الطول المقاس؟
وعندك هذه للنساء ولا الرجال؟ بس بالنسبة هذه يميلون أكثر شيء للنساء. النساء الأقبال عليه كثير هذا.
طيب راعينا في هذا.
نحن الاستخدام
We burn incense every day at home, starting at 5 a.m. They burn it in all the houses.
في كل بيت ضفار.
It's essential for us. We always have it around.
هذا يعني شيء أساسي موجود. إنزين.
We use it for weddings, special occasions, either as perfume or for burning.
حتى الأجانب صاروا الإقبال عليه بالنسبة في الخليج.
Everybody uses incense, even foreigners, particularly the people from the Gulf countries. It's really essential.
This is Grigoriy frankincense. This is another kind, Quadri. The quality is not as good. All the varieties come from one single type of tree. Incense is the sap of the tree. Sometimes it's white, other times it is darker. This one comes from the white sap. It's pure. We gather the incense on the tree. Then we grind it in a machine, we mix it with musk and add scents. Here, for example, you have incense mixed with sandalwood, and this one too. The only thing that's different is the scent we add to the incense.
In Sumaram, the frankincense roots fade into the blue waters of the Gulf of Oman. So to try to pick up their traces, we're going to turn inland, towards the Rub al-Khali, the desert of deserts. Only the caravaneers know the secrets of navigating this vast ocean of sand. As soon as we leave Salalah, we meet a Jameli from the Dhofar Mountains. Dressed in the traditional costume, he's leading his herd of dromedaries as they have been doing for ages.
We come from the mountains and we come down to the plains. Sometimes we go east, sometimes west, and we carry on grazing our herds. But right here is the best place to be, especially in the fall. Each tribe may have 100, 150, up to 200 camels. The camels graze here during the day, and at night we gather them back into the fold. Then in the morning we take them out to graze again. These plains have always been used for camels, but now the cities are gaining ground. It's true that we have more comfort. Now we live better, thanks be to God. But the wide urban spaces where the camels could roam are shrinking. A third, even two-thirds of the people here carry on living like they used to, raising livestock, and they're not about to give up their herds.
We continue our route into the interior of Dhofar, heading for the Wadi Doka Valley, a historical frankincense-producing site that has been saved thanks to UNESCO. Our guide suggests that we pick up one of his friends on the way, a frankincense harvester who lives right nearby the Wadi Doka.
السلام عليكم. ورحمة الله. كيف حالك؟ كيف الأحوال؟ عساك بخير، كيف أحوالك؟ خبري. خبر خير، كيف أحوالك؟ حياك الله، تفضل السيارة.
Where are we going, Ali?
We just got onto the road that goes to Wadi Doka. We're going to see the frankincense trees. I hope we'll be able to make a good cut. There are very old frankincense trees there. They've surely been there for thousands of years. It's a very rare sight that you could only see in Dhofar, this province of Oman.
في عمان اللي هي محافظ ظفار.
This scrubby little tree is a Boswellia sacra, the frankincense tree. It grows only in the Dhofar region, in Yemen, and in Eritrea, in the Horn of Africa. It's a rare tree whose resin used to be worth its weight in gold. For Ali, these trees, which are several hundred years old, are sacred. He takes extremely good care of them, sometimes spending hours just cleaning them. He removes the dry outer bark, which keeps the tree from breathing, thus allowing fresh bark to form. The new bark is thinner, so it will be easier to cut and will allow the sap to run more freely.
We come once a week. We make the cuts, then leave for 6 to 7 days. Once the sap is hardened a bit, we come back to harvest the frankincense. A tree like this one can give 3 to 4 liters, which means 3, 4, or 5 kilos of frankincense. When we cut at this height, the sap runs down and accumulates. The best variety is the Grigoriy frankincense, which looks like a pearl. It's shiny like a pearl. It's the type you find in the desert. As it's pure, you can dissolve it in water and use it as a medication for stomach problems. It's good for eliminating gas. The best time to harvest is when it's hot, because the hotter it is, the more incense the tree gives. The frankincense tree is very important to me. It's a rare, special tree that allows us to earn a living. It means a lot to me. It's like a treasure, but this treasure is not mine alone. It belongs to everyone. It's a sacred tree. You don't have the right to come here and make a sloppy cut. You don't have the right to damage this tree. You have to have the right experience in order to make it cut, and if you do it wrong, you wound the tree, and that's a real pity.
For the last time, we get on the road and head for Wadi Bani Khalid and Ubar. Dhofar's riches were based on the frankincense trade. All along the caravan routes were caravanserais and staging towns. The town of Ubar was not an ordinary stopover. It was an oasis and the last watering point before the long trek across the desert. Archaeologists have been trying to locate Ubar for decades. Then in 1984, a curious phenomenon appeared on infrared photographs taken by an American satellite. Old camel trails showed up very clearly, then they disappeared under huge sand dunes only to reappear mysteriously on the other side. Beneath the dunes was the ancient city of Ubar. In the past few years, the phantom city has once again come alive, thanks to some Bedouin families that have settled here. The archaeological excavations that were undertaken in the early 1990s have uncovered the ruins of the city walls and 8 towers, so Ubar was not just a legend.
According to the experts, the ancient city of Ubar dates back 7,000 years. As there was a sinkhole in the mountain, and that sinkhole contained water, once Ubar was destroyed, this place became known for the well called Ash Shusar. So the caravans would stop here, and the camels would drink before crossing the desert. In the golden age of the frankincense roots, they would say that a kilo of frankincense was worth a kilo of gold. The caravans would load up with incense here in Ubar, and then they would head out across the desert in different directions. If this region remained well known, it's thanks to the incense trade.
For ages, the frankincense routes that crossed the desert sands were the envy of the different nations of antiquity. Now the Arabian Peninsula draws its wealth from oil. Even though this black gold is the new treasure of happy Arabia, it will never stir the same passion and enthusiasm as that miraculous resin transported by the ancient caravans. The roots of black gold and their pipelines may very well cross the desert, but they'll never replace the mythical roots of frankincense in the imagination of the traveler.